The morning mist clung to the trees like a ghostly shroud, muffling the sound of boots crunching against the frozen ground. Captain Samuel Hayes adjusted the grip on his musket, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The British would be coming soon, he could feel it in his bones. Behind him, his men stirred restlessly, their uniforms tattered and their faces worn from weeks of battle. The Red River outpost was little more than a crumbling fort, its wooden walls scarred with bullet holes, but it was the last American stronghold in this stretch of the frontier. If they lost it, the British would have an open path southward, threatening key settlements. Private John Mercer approached, his expression grim. Scouts spotted movement to the north. "Redcoats, sir." "A lot of them." Hayes nodded. "Then this is where we make our stand." The men took their positions behind the barricades, loading their muskets with practiced precision. The distant sound of marching boots soon grew into a steady drumbeat, accompanied by the occasional bark of an officer's command. Then, through the thinning fog, the British appeared, rows of red-coated soldiers advancing in perfect formation, their bayonets gleaming in the weak morning light. The first volley of musket fire erupted, tearing into the American defenses. Hayes fired his own musket, reloading swiftly as the enemy closed the distance. Cannon fire shook the ground, splintering wooden barriers and sending debris flying. Men screamed, some in pain, others in fury, but the line held. Hours passed in a relentless exchange of fire. Smoke thickened in the air, making it hard to see more than a few yards ahead. The British charged the fort's entrance, but the Americans repelled them with bayonets and grit. Hayes fought alongside his men, his uniform stained with sweat and gunpowder, his arms aching from the repeated recoil of his weapon. The battle intensifies. By midday, the British had encircled the fort, their artillery hammering the already weakened defenses. The wooden palisades groaned under the relentless assault, sections collapsing and exposing the defenders to direct musket fire. Hayes ordered his men to fall back to the inner courtyard, where hastily built barricades would be their last line of defense. Sergeant Thomas Wilkes, a veteran of many skirmishes, approached Hayes, his face smeared with soot and blood. "Sir, we're running low on powder and shot. We won't be able to hold them much longer." Hayes clenched his jaw. They had expected reinforcements days ago, but none had come. They were on their own. "Then we make every shot count," he said grimly. "We hold them here." The next wave came swiftly. British soldiers surged through the shattered walls, their bayonets glinting as they charged. The Americans fired in disciplined volleys, cutting down dozens, but for every redcoat that fell, 2 more took his place. The fighting turned desperate, muskets discarded as soldiers grappled in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Private Mercer, wounded but still fighting, used his bayonet to fend off an enemy officer. He turned to Hayes, his eyes fierce despite the blood running down his temple. "We won't let them take this fort, Captain." Hayes nodded, gripping Mercer's shoulder briefly before raising his sword. "Hold the line." The final stand. By late afternoon, the battle had reached its climax. The Americans were outnumbered, their forces dwindling with every passing minute. The inner courtyard was a scene of chaos, wounded men groaning in the snow, gunpowder smoke hanging thick in the air, and the relentless clash of steel echoing through the fort. Hayes gathered his remaining men, no more than a dozen now. "We fight to the last," he declared. "For our country, for our brothers." With a final, defiant cry, they charged into the British ranks, knowing full well that they would not survive. Blades met flesh, muskets fired at point-blank range, and the ground became slick with blood. One by one, the defenders fell, but they did not break. Their determination, their sheer will, kept them fighting until the very end. Aftermath. When the battle ended, the Red River outpost was lost. British banners flew over the fort, and the air was thick with the scent of gunpowder and death. Yet, the defenders' sacrifice had not been in vain. The delay they had caused proved crucial. American reinforcements, having finally received word of the attack, arrived the following day and forced the British into a retreat. The strategic outpost was retaken, and the names of Captain Hayes and his men became legends. The story of the last stand at Red River was told for generations, a tale of courage and sacrifice that inspired countless soldiers who followed. Though the names of those who had fought faded with time, their valor would never be forgotten.